Very exciting. My name is Nika Allahverdi, and I'm your instructor today. And you are experiencing Nimdzi Live. This is our Workshop Wednesday day. So Nimdzi learning workshops and events cover localization processes, strategies, industry intelligence, best practices, and language technology. The Nimdzi learning experience will give you and your global team the tools you need to make your organization great and take it to the next level. Our offerings cover localization project management training, localization QA training, sales process training, translation resources, and much, much more. And you can explore our ever-expanding selection of training and development options on our website and see which one is best for your organization. And as you are joining us, or if you are already joining or you're already here, this is a reminder in the beginning of the spiel here to subscribe if you're not already subscribed. We have a number of channels where we stream and post all sorts of updates on our industry and other topics, live stream events. So subscribe to LinkedIn if you're watching this on LinkedIn, or on your other favorite channels if you're watching there. So welcome to everybody who's joining. A little bit about the platform. We are streaming from LinkedIn today via LinkedIn events because don't be afraid to put your comments in, put your questions, and we'll try to get to as much as we can today. We have a lot to cover. And don't be shy, share, comment, add your reaction buttons. And if the stream gets interrupted on LinkedIn, sometimes this happens. I am in Brno in a hotel room, so anything can happen. But if it does get interrupted, we are also streaming on YouTube and Facebook and Twitter. So if I get cut off, I will try to jump back in. And if the stream gets cut off, here on LinkedIn, you can continue streaming from YouTube or Facebook or Twitter. And also subscribe there because you can get your updates there. So without further ado, welcome once more to everybody who's joining us. My name again is Nika Allahverdi. I am the Chief Marketing Officer here at Nimdzi Insights. Today's workshop will be about conflict management and nonviolent communication. And this is a workshop for teams who work together, but there are also a lot of takeaways that you can take into your personal life. We will be looking at different perspectives, intent behind communication, different tools that you can start using today, and again, for work and outside of work. So as you work on communicating from a place of empathy, and this is a word that will come up often in this workshop, you will see that your perspectives may be starting to shift, and this is important to bring awareness to it. Perspective is one of the most valuable tools that you have, and there is no one-size-fits-all model for communication across the board, and no matter what different models will tell you, at the end of the day, a little bit of compassion and a little bit of empathy never hurt anybody, or it shouldn't have. So something to remember as we go through this presentation, it's about conflict, but conflict is not necessarily a bad thing. It's not inherently a bad thing. Conflict can be very helpful. It can help you grow and learn about people around you and about the world around you. So the purpose of this workshop is to bring awareness to how we communicate. And while there will be some technical bits here, it's really an exercise of going back to the essence of communication. And if I know anything about you who is joining this workshop, communication probably matters to you. And if you are in our space in the translation, localization, and space, then you know the importance of communication in this industry. And there is a good chance that you are part of a diverse team or an international team. And the people that you work with may be from different countries, different cultures, or just have an overall different mindset than you. So communication challenges are normal, and they will arise even between people who come from the same place or know each other very well. And again, conflict is not inherently bad. So we're going to be looking at that and at some takeaways. So perhaps you work with clients or vendors in other countries, or you have encountered cultural differences, or maybe you have been lost in translation, like many of us have. So in this workshop, we will be looking at several methodologies to give us a framework around communication in any organization. And again, you can bring this stuff into your personal life as well. And whether it's in your work environment, with people you know, with people that you're meeting for the first time. So there will be some frameworks that you will be able to bring into your life starting today. We will look at different communication styles, reasons why conflict may arise, and how to choose the best approach to conflict management. We will be looking at principles of nonviolent communication, as you may know from the title of this presentation, and you will be walking away with new tools in your professional toolkit for managing conflict and for fostering collaboration between your peers. And it's actually kind of funny that I'm the one giving this workshop, because communication is a challenge for me. I am very slow to respond to emails and chats sometimes, so I have a lot of things that I'm working on, but here we are. So let's first start off with this beautiful picture of Oprah. And the reason I put Oprah into the slide deck is because before she goes into a meeting, Oprah Winfrey asks herself, well, what is the intention of this meeting, right? Why is it important for me to be a good communicator? These are the questions you want to ask yourself. Why is it important to improve my skills in conflict management? And so these are questions that you also want to ask yourself. Why is communication important for you? What are some gaps that you may have in your communication? We're not perfect. We are human. And we have constantly things maybe that we're working on, or at least speaking for myself, I do. The agenda for today, there will be part 1 on awareness and conflict. Part 2 is going to be about approaches to conflict management, and part 3 will be about nonviolent communication. And I have done a version of this workshop a couple months ago for the ALC, and on the way to San Francisco, which is where I was streaming from for that event, something interesting happened, and I would like to just take a moment for story time. On the way there, I was on the freeway, and this was in California, and people on the freeway, sometimes there's a little bit of road rage where I come from. You may be familiar with this, but I was next to a truck, hence the picture of a truck, and there were 2 cars behind me, 2 really fancy sports cars, race cars, and they were competing with each other, or trying to get in front of me and in front of the truck. And basically what happened was, these cars, I saw them in my mirror, and I see them coming. And we almost got into a car accident between the 2 of them, me and the truck. And if it weren't for me anticipating what was happening, the truck would have easily crashed into me. And as the cars pass me by, I look over to the guy on the right, who's the truck driver, and I kind of want to see, like, hey, did you just see what happened? And he's making an expression towards me, and I thought we're gonna bond over this survival moment, but he's over there waving a middle finger at me. I'm like, well, that's nice. The reason I tell the story is because if I were to react in a different way, I would have crashed into that truck, or that truck would have crashed into me. So one of the motifs of this workshop is, you have time and you have choice. So you don't have to make decisions immediately, but if you have these tools in your toolkit, you might have an easier time hopefully in your life, and you might avoid situations where you don't really want to be in. So in this situation, I was able to remain calm, but again, people are not perfect and emotions can take over us. And we may end up doing something we regret or didn't particularly mean to do. So that was the story with the truck. Thank you for listening. Conflict situations are those in which the concerns of two people appear to be incompatible. And again, if you have tools to choose from, which we will be looking at today, you will feel empowered rather than disempowered. So in part one, we are going to look at awareness and conflict. That's what we're going to be exploring. So here in this part, I'm starting off with from the artist of the image. And the reason I bring up metonymy is because it's a cool word, but also because with metonymy, you've got meaning and you've got words. And your words are trying to get as close to meaning, but your words do not equal meaning. So we're different. Conflict seems unavoidable. And metonymy is a figure of speech consisting of the use of the name of one thing that is used for another thing. So language is like that. Communication is like that. Some examples of metonymy: the White House, Hollywood referring to the film industry, saying something like, I'm all ears. You're not really talking about your ears. You're saying, I'm ready for attention. I'm listening. So with language, we are not only, we're communicating in not only through words, we are using words as a vehicle for meaning, but there's also other ways of communicating. Body language, right? And we may react to situations out of anger or from habit, because we're insecure or uncertain, because there's a fear of a certain consequence, or because we may be misunderstanding, or maybe we didn't hear something correctly. Maybe we're misreading body language. And this is all normal. As a colleague, as a teammate, as a leader, it is in your best interest to have different tools to facilitate communication. And it is a good idea to bring awareness to the different ways that people are able to communicate. And I would like to go to the slide with Maslow. One second. Oh, actually, can we go back to the slide of why, what causes us to respond? Yeah. So we respond to situations because we feel threatened, or we feel disrespected. We're afraid of not getting what we want, or we're afraid of being misunderstood, right? We feel powerless. So these are all, again, this is all normal. And if now we can go to the slide with Maslow, which I already gave it away. The question was, do you know who this person is? This is Abraham Maslow. He was an American psychologist who's best known for creating the hierarchy of needs, which is a theory of psychological health. And it includes the different needs that you have as a human. So why do we communicate? Because we're trying to get a message across, because we have needs. So in the pyramid here, Maslow, I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. We've got physiological needs. And you can see water, air, food, shelter. These are the things that we need to survive. Safety needs to keep us safe, personal security, employment, resources, health, property. And then we have love and belonging, Then we have esteem, and then we have self-actualization, which is to be part of something maybe bigger than us. And let's start with a simple reminder of what Maslow's hierarchy, the hierarchy of needs, is in general. So it's a theory about the categories of needs. And this 5-tier pyramid of human needs includes the needs that I just mentioned. With physiological needs, these are for survival. And before reaching those higher needs, we need to make sure that we satisfy the primary needs, like food, drinking water, air, sleep, etc. Safety needs include feeling safe and comfortable in your environment, because when these things are threatened, this is when we start to react, right? And this is when maybe we lose control and we're not able to communicate. So after physiological needs are fulfilled, we want to have safety. Safety includes security, stability, and at this point, you're getting rid of fear. You want order. The 11 belonging need, which is the next tier, 11 belonging needs means you have a need for human connection. The need for belonging makes people want to be part of a group, and the absence of socialization can cause social anxiety, depression, clinical depression. In other words, a person who has a need, people have a need to feel like they belong to a group. So this is that next tier. With the with the esteem needs are those, the needs of being recognized by others, recognized for the things that we do. And they can be fulfilled in a number of ways, mastering a task, developing competence for a task. And in other words, it's the desire for strength and confidence and freedom. And at this point, you're connecting with others, right? And then for the last one, it's the self-actualization one. So again, connecting to something that is maybe bigger than us. You're creating art, you're sharing that. There's self-fulfillment. And at this point, you have curiosity and again, connecting to something that maybe is bigger than you. If we go to the slide with the graph with the different needs, you can see how the different needs with time are changing. So on the x-axis, you have the personal development, and on the y-axis, you have the intensity of those needs. So as your personal development, as you develop more personally, right? Personal development, the different needs actually are changing. So first, you have physiological needs, and with time, as you develop more personally, that need decreases. Whereas the one on the top tier, for example, self-actualization, that increases with time. So bringing this back into your life, how is this practical for you? So in order to prevent possible, let's say, if you're a project manager, to prevent possible troubles and delays in projects, and if you're a project manager, you're considering the needs of those people around you, it is your duty to recognize the different needs and triggers of people around you. So you can bring this Maslow's theory into your actual life as a project manager, to take an example, right? And at the end of this presentation, there's a resource called Maslow's Hierarchy of Needs in Project Management. I'm not going to go through all of the different needs right now just because of time. And I think we're already a chunk in time, but there's so much I want to cover. But that piece I would recommend for you to read, because it connects this hierarchy with project management specifically, and you can find it in the resources. So let's move on to the slide on pushing people's buttons. Yes. So again, when I bring up needs, because we're bringing awareness in part one to the reasons why we are reacting to things. So you may have heard the expression pushing people's buttons. And there are all kinds of situations where we are triggered to respond. And we're relating this back to conflict again, right? We're bringing awareness to conflict. So if you've heard the expression of pushing people's buttons or having your buttons pushed, this is related to the idea of reactions getting triggered. And reactions is a good word to use here because it's causing us to react in certain ways, even if we are not particularly, if we don't want to react in certain ways. We are predisposed in some ways. And in bringing awareness to these things, you can pause that reaction. You can give yourself time, not react right away. A significant part of managing conflict and effective communication in general has to do with recognizing how we react in certain situations and then preventing the negative reactions that we then may regret. So if you've ever gotten an email from a colleague and it made you want to roll up your sleeves and write a response right away, and if you've ever sent that, you might have regretted that the next day or regretted it right away. So a good idea would be to maybe write a draft, save it, reread it, put yourself into another person's perspective, see where they're coming from, and then send it. Reacting right away may make you feel like you're getting yourself out there and you're getting your message out there and you're getting yourself heard. But in all honesty, there's a good chance you're going to regret it. So instead of doing that, there are things that you can do as a good communicator and things that you can avoid doing as a bad communicator. So poor communicators, for example, will ask more close-ended questions, whereas a good communicator will do the opposite, ask more open-ended questions. A poor communicator might multitask while talking with others. A good communicator will focus on the other person while they are talking. You may have emotional outbursts when you're frustrated, thinking of the example of writing that email, whereas a good communicator might be able to control your emotions a little bit more. Give yourself, again, that time to not react right away. So things that you can do right away, give yourself a moment, give yourself a beat before sending that email. And this isn't only about emails. This isn't your reactions with people. You don't have to react right away. Give yourself time to take a beat. So communication is the real work of leadership, and you simply can't just become a great leader until you have mastered communication, because you want to get your message across, right? Good communicators are inspiring people. They create a communication that is real, it's personal, and again, this word empathy is going to come up. Okay, so some things you can do to be a good communicator is keep the interlocutor in mind. Act as if when you're communicating, you want to imagine the people that you're speaking with. The trick is to eliminate distraction from the crowd. You can deliver your message as if you were talking to somebody specifically. So you may, if you listen to TED Talks and videos and read books on communication, oftentimes the writer or speaker, they will tell you, if you're speaking to a crowd of people, imagine that you're speaking to one person and relate to them specifically. And it's easier for somebody who's listening to try to relate to that person that you're relating to, rather than have you try to relate to everybody at the same time. So the trick here is, the trick here is to speak as if you're speaking to one person. And then when you are speaking with intention, you want to talk so that people listen. When you're talking to when you're talking to somebody directly, again, you're able to build that connection and work through a place of empathy. So you're connecting on a deeper level, right? When you're able to speak to one person. And again, speaking to one person in a crowd of people will as when you're speaking to one person, again, people are going to be able to see that from that person's perspective. I don't know if I put that very well. How ironic. So bringing it back to empathy. Oh, and we can go to the slide with, yeah, that one. The one right before. Thanks. So empathy is the capacity to understand or feel what another person is experiencing from within their frame of reference. And that is the capacity to place yourself in another person's position. And definitions of empathy encompass a broad range of social, cognitive, and emotional processes, primarily concerned with understanding others, right? So some ways to do this: observing body language. The body is communicating, not using words, right? A lot of us are behind screens, and we're not always able to see the people that we're working with in general, but the body communicates nonstop, and it is an abundant source of information. So pay attention to that, and there's loads of resources to try to understand body language, but you cannot fully understand communication without paying attention to body language. Another thing you want to do is practice active listening. And when you are listening actively, you are spending more time listening than talking, and you are not answering questions with questions, and you are avoiding finishing people's sentences. Now, this is an interesting one for me because sometimes when somebody's finishing your sentences, it's actually a feeling of, oh, I'm being listened to. Somebody is is hearing what I'm saying and is able to predict what I'm going to say next. But something that I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation is that there's no one model fits all when it comes to communication. So when you're coming from a place of empathy, you're putting yourself into the shoes of that other person, right? So you may have somebody for whom finishing a sentence is very disrespectful. You may have another person for whom finishing a sentence makes them feel secure, right? So if you take the time to put yourself into that person's space, maybe get to know where they're coming from, you will understand whether or not those things work for them. And I don't want to say this to put more processes into your CPU, but if you are, again, and this is part one of bringing awareness, if you are bringing awareness to these things, you will be able to connect with people on a different level. And another thing with practicing working with listening actively is you want to focus more on the other person than you do on yourself. So again, there's no one size fits all, but in bringing awareness, you are opening yourself up to seeing, hey, is my communication being effective right now? Another good example is something that I like to ask people in general, because this is very different across the board, and it can be a cultural thing or it can be a personal thing. And this is interruptions. So for some people, or in some cultures, being interrupted, especially in a work setting, is very rude because it makes the person feel that they are not being listened to. However, in other cultures, an interruption is actually very, very normal, and can even be a sign of respect. So again, this is not prescriptive. It's not always saying do this, don't do this. What the theme here is bring awareness to it. These skills are important because they help build awareness. Again, the more aware you are, the more tools that you have in your toolkit, the more effective your communication will be. And at the end of the day, if we're considering needs and we're considering the things that we want to communicate, the more tools you have in your toolkit, the easier it will be for you to get your message across. So we're not perfect. We make mistakes. We may be reactive. We may have things that trigger us, but it's okay. Just start building awareness in your professional setting and in your personal setting. So by considering various responses to conflict, we actually have more things, more tools to work with. Again, right? The toolkit. Okay, so a lot of things there. Let's look at approaches to conflict management. So something a little bit more specific than bringing awareness to things in general. So something a little bit more specific. In this part, we will be looking at the Thomas Kilmann conflict mode instrument, also known as TKI. And this is a really interesting resource. There are 5 types of styles of conflict management. And you will see some animals here. They're the honey badgers. At Nimdzi, the honey badger is our spirit animal. So I threw them into the presentation. And the reason that, just a side note, that the honey badger is our spirit animal is because you may or may not know the honey badger video. It's a little animal that is fierce and gets things done and will always find a way out of any situation. So we have 2 little honey badgers looking at each other. And in this part, we will be, again, looking at the this TKI model and at 5 styles of conflict management. So it's a model. The TKI instrument has been a leader in conflict resolution assessment for more than 40 years. And it's been used by human resources and organizational development consultants. It's been used by mediators, by negotiators, and many practitioners in the coaching profession, career coaches, business coaches, life coaches, and so on. And the TKI model and the literature around it has sold like more than 8 million copies, and it's been around since the 70s. And besides its native language that it was published in was in English, it's also been published in a number of other languages. So it's a tool that's used around the world. It's published in Spanish, French, Portuguese, Danish, Dutch, a number of languages. And in conflict situations, we can describe an individual's behavior along 2 dimensions. So these are the dimensions used in the tool. You have assertiveness, and this is the extent to which the person attempts to satisfy his own concerns. And then you have cooperativeness. This is the extent to which the person attempts to satisfy the other person's concerns. So again, we're getting a little bit more technical now. So there are 2 underlying dimensions to human behavior, according to this model, the assertiveness and cooperativeness. And they can be used to define 5 different modes to responding to conflict situations. So the 5 modes you can see in the image. You've got competing, collaborating, compromising, avoiding, and accommodating. And the reason this tool's been used and is talked about often in conflict management is because it works. And again, it's adding tools to your professional toolkit for managing conflict. So let's look at competing. Competing is assertive and uncooperative. So you can see competing's on the top left side. And it's when an individual pursues his own concerns at the other person's expense. So this is a power-oriented mode in which you use whatever power seems appropriate to win your own position. So your ability to argue, your rank, your economic sanctions, and competing means standing up for your own rights and defending a position where you believe you're sometimes it's not appropriate. So this strategy works well when you're in a commanding position and you have limited time and resources to solve the conflict, and you say, and you're you've got the power to really say, this is the way it's going to work. And this, again, works in some situations. It's not something that you want to do all the time, right? You don't want to be a tyrant. Who wants to communicate with a tyrant? Another mode, accommodating. The accommodating mode, you can see, is unassertive and cooperative. So it's the complete opposite of competing. When accommodating, when you're using the accommodating mode, the individual, person using it, neglects his own concerns to satisfy the concerns of another person. So there's an element of self-sacrifice here, and again, works in some situations. You might take the form of generosity or charity or obeying another person's order. And again, you're yielding to another person's point of view. It's appropriate in some situations. It's not appropriate in others. But if you are a good communicator, and if you do some of the things mentioned in part 1, which is put yourself into the other person's shoes, give yourself a beat or a moment before you respond or send an email, or you feel that something's triggering you before you respond, you might say, hey, okay, this is an appropriate mode for this specific conflict. The avoiding mode, you can see that in the graph, avoiding is unassertive and uncooperative. So the person neither pursues his own concerns nor those of the other individual. So he or she, they do not deal with the conflict, and they avoid that conflict at the time, which might be sidestepping the issue, postponing the conflict for a better time. You're avoiding that conflict at that time. So when would this be appropriate? For example, if I'm in a meeting with another colleague and a client, and I say, okay, well, I know that what I want to say is really right or correct, or I really want to make a point, but in that situation, it's not appropriate. So we're going to avoid proving a point and put that into the parking lot, right? Put that into a time where it'll be more appropriate, because it's not appropriate for the situation. With if you're with a client, you're not going to be arguing with your colleague specifically, right? And again, this is all situational, but in general, if you say, hey, these are the different modes, maybe for this specific time, if I'm getting triggered to make a point, but for this specific time, maybe this is not the appropriate approach. So people use this conflict management strategy when they know that they don't have any authority over the other person. Instead, they avoid confrontation, or they ignore the conflict completely. So avoiding is often seen as passive or weak. But again, if you are in the position of choosing one of the different modes, you're actually empowering yourself to say, hey, this is not a battle I'm willing to fight right now. It doesn't mean that I'm avoiding because I'm in a place of weakness. It means that no, at this time, it's just not the right method. So I'm going to avoid that conflict at that time. Then you've got collaborating, which is both assertive and cooperative. The opposite of avoiding. So collaborating involves an attempt to work with others to find some solution that fully satisfies their concerns. So you're digging into an issue to pinpoint the underlying needs and wants of two individuals. Collaborating between two persons might take the form of exploring a disagreement to learn from each other's insights. Okay? And it's an ideal choice if both parties are committed to reaching a mutual agreement, and the goal here is to reach an agreement with each other, right? It's an agreement. And then the last one is compromising. Compromising is moderate in both assertiveness and cooperativeness. And the objective is to find some expedient that is a mutually acceptable solution that partially satisfies both parties. And it falls intermediate between competing and accommodating. So compromising, giving up more than competing, but less than accommodating. And it addresses an issue more directly than if you were to choose the avoiding mode, but it does not explore it in depth, in as much depth as collaborating. So in some situations, compromising might mean splitting the difference between two positions, seeking a middle ground. And if you compromise, you take the middle road between two opposing views, and that means you are agreeing to specific terms and giving up on certain other items. And since you're trying to solve a disagreement, it's important that you show flexibility in this mode. So the strategy usually gives the feeling of a win-win scenario, and you've got two parties that feel that they've gained something out of the conflict. And each of us is capable of using the 5 different conflict handling modes here, and none of us can be characterized as having one single style of dealing with conflict. And again, bringing it back to the idea of the toolkit, right? These are things that you have when you have a conflict. You don't only have one way of reacting to a conflict. You have a toolkit here. So you can be naturally pulled to certain modes more than others. That's normal. And your conflict behavior in the workplace is a result of both your personal predispositions. So there might be things that trigger me that won't trigger another colleague, and vice versa. So the conflict behavior in the workplace is a result of the personal predispositions and then the requirements of that situation where you find yourself. And again, like I mentioned, there's no one size fits all model. You have a number of tools to choose from. So these are 5 styles of handling conflict. And an understanding of the 5 styles should be used to plan an approach to a difficult conversation or meeting. So you might even kind of plan ahead and say, hey, what is the best tool to use in this specific situation? Okay. And then wow, time's going really fast. Going to part 3. Part 3 is the nonviolent communication bit, also known as NVC. And it all comes back to communication. So we are in a space and in an industry that works with multilingual communication on a daily basis, or a lot of us are. And again, there's so much that can get lost in translation, in body language, and things like interruptions or finishing people's sentences, things that work for some people, things that don't. So there's a lot that can get lost in translation, and even in our own language and culture. People are different, people react differently, and again, people are predisposed to things differently. So we're not perfect, and we don't always manage matching our intentions with our actions. And if we're willing to take the time to work on these things and to bring awareness, to continuously bring awareness to our actions and to the needs of others, we can sharpen our skills and get better at communicating our needs, get better at understanding the needs of others. Because again, what's the goal here? It's communication. Fortunately, there's another great resource that we will be looking at today very quickly, and it's nonviolent communication. And this is something that's been getting a lot of steam recent. It's been picked up a lot by speakers. NVC, nonviolent communication. And why is this important now? And why is this important to you? So nonviolent communication, NVC, it's an approach to communication based on principles of nonviolence, and it was designed to increase empathy, again, this beautiful word, empathy, to improve the quality of life of those who utilize the method and the people around them, right? So it comes from Mr. or Dr. Rosenberg, who wrote a book on nonviolent communication, A Language of Life. And it's a popular self-help book And it's one of the popular psychotherapy books, and it's often considered the authoritative text on this concept. And it's got 4 components to it: observation, feeling, needs, and requests. NVC is a communication tool with the goal of first creating, empathy in a conversation. And it's based on the idea that there's empathy between parties in a conversation. And it's much easier to talk about solutions that satisfy the parties' needs. And the goal here is to create interpersonal harmony and obtaining knowledge for future cooperation. So some of the notable concepts of NVC, nonviolent communication, include rejecting coercive forms of discourse. So you're not blaming people here. Gathering facts through observation without evaluating, and expressing feelings and needs genuinely and correctly, and formulating effective and empathetic requests. So nonviolent communication is used as a clinical psychotherapy modality and as a self-help technique, particularly as it relates to seeking harmony in relationships, both personal and in the workplace. There are a number of benefits to nonviolent communication. Helps navigate conflict, considers needs and emotions of the other person or other people, and you're refraining from blame, and it is objective. So let's say somebody says something that really doesn't sit well with you, and if you're coming with an NVC approach, you're not saying something like, "You're not listening to me." You might be asking yourself, am I communicating the message to my best ability, right? So you're not blaming the person for not being able to understand your message. You're asking yourself, hey, am I communicating the message to my best ability? And there are 4 steps to nonviolent communication. You're observing, so reminding yourself that, hey, you need to explicitly distinguish between judgment and observations. And if you're bringing this into a team setting, you want your team to know exactly what those observations are without evaluating. So again, you're not placing blame, and you're approaching a conflict with you're not approaching a conflict with a preconceived notion. You are listening, and you're listening, and you're able to take away any blame you're observing, right? So next, feelings. You'll want your people's leaders to ask questions. So if you're bringing NVC into a work environment, you're going to want to ask the leaders of your company to ask questions that help deepen their understanding of an employee's feelings from thoughts. You're identifying how an employee feels after or during a conflict, and that can help managers to better understand the needs of those that you're working with. So if you're bringing NVC into your organization, you're asking things like, how are you feeling? How do you feel about what happened? What are 2 or 3 emotions that are coming up for you? How do you feel most about whatever emotion here? What do you feel most with a certain emotion? You're looking at needs. So when employees' needs are met, they're happier. And when they aren't, they don't feel comfortable, and they feel frustrated, they feel anxious, right? So we have time. Again, you're working through empathy, and you're not blaming. And then the last part here is requests. An important part of NVC is being able to communicate what it is that you want as for your needs to be met. So you want to agree on concrete actions to take to resolve a certain issue. This is often the hardest step because you have to balance the needs of both parties if you're acting as a mediator until a compromise is reached. But again, you're able to communicate something that you are asking, right? You're asking for. So you're able to communicate your needs. And We can go to the next slide. This is a worksheet from the book on NVC. And if you download the slide deck, you can take a closer look at it. You've got your observations, feelings, needs, and requests, those four. And then on the next slide, you will see that there are 3 modes of nonviolent communication. We're trying to get through a lot in this presentation. And the 3 modes are combining everything that we've talked about so far in the hour. So self-empathy, receiving empathetically, and expressing honestly. Again, being able to express your needs. So some things to consider, also from the NVC book. This is on the next slide. Here. Yeah, some things to consider. This is again from the book. These are basic needs that some basic feelings that we all have and basic needs that we all have. And I'm sure there are other things that you might add to it, or some things that might not fully resonate with you, but it's still a good resource to go through as you are looking at NVC, and potentially to bring this into your work environment. There's a lot of miscommunication that happens in the work environment again. But if you are able to, wrapping this up, if you're able to bring awareness to the things that trigger you, and if you are able to communicate from a place of empathy and from a place of nonviolence, you are much, much more likely to get your message across and feel like you're being heard. So with that, I will take a breath and say thank you for joining and for listening if you're still here. At the end of the slide deck, there's a number of resources to check out. I recommend the one on project management. That's a good read. And yeah, to wrap it up, this is part of Nimdzi Learning. And in the slide deck, you'll see a library of courses that courses and workshops that Nimdzi provides. This one specifically is on trying to combine a lot of things into 1 hour on communication, but there is a number of things that that is included in Nimdzi Learning. There's a number of workshops that Nimdzi gives. I'm not even going to read all of that, but thank you for joining today's topic. And I haven't even seen any of the comments from this workshop, but yeah. That was so fast. Well, thank you for joining Workshop Wednesday. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Nimdzi, info@nimdzi.com, or to me directly, or into the comment section, which I will be looking at. Maybe Tucker, maybe now's a good time to look at that. Got a couple minutes. Oh. I'm sweating. And I will include the slide deck in the event, specifically for. on top of it. Well, if you are listening to this, you got to the end of this, thank you for joining. I know we try to cover quite a lot in an hour. And if you're not sweating, I am. But yeah, reach out, leave your questions. I will take a look after the event because I'm not in front of the questions right now, but slide deck's up if you want it. And I definitely recommend some of the reading in those resources, especially on project management. How you can bring some of the skills into your workplace if you are a PM, or if you're not a PM, you can still bring a lot of that into your daily life. So thank you for joining. Tucker, thank you for managing the stuff on the back end. And yeah, right at an hour.